Good evening. Upon posting my previous summer camp video, I was sent many new summer camp stories. Apparently, camp is a scary place, even if you don't have a hockey mask wearing, machete wielding maniac after you. So please, enjoy these 3 extra true scary summer camp stories submitted by subscribers to this channel. Number 1. Sleeping. My parents sent me to summer camp every summer. I liked it enough, but I assumed that they sent me there to make their lives easier. They probably saw it as a summer babysitting job, but a parent should always make sure that their babysitters are capable of fully protecting their children before sending them away. I began going to camp as soon as I was old enough to do so. I got really used to spending a large portion of my summer sleeping in a cabin with no air conditioning, no television, and 9 other boys who were roughly my age. I was always able to fall asleep pretty easily in the muggy and often noisy cabin. This particular summer, I was 13 years old. I had a pretty awful experience. There were 5 bunk beds in the cabin, each set against the walls. There were 2 on the back wall, and 1 on each of the other walls. This summer, I was sleeping in a bottom bunk on the side wall. Although I had fallen asleep rather quickly, I woke up in the middle of the night, and saw something I couldn't quite make out. Keep in mind I was very groggy, and it was unbelievably humid in the cabin. We had some fans set in there, but they really didn't help a whole lot. It was very dark in the cabin, and I saw what looked like the shadow of an adult figure standing across the room. It was at the bed parallel to my own. I couldn't make out who it was, but he was pretty tall, and he could easily see up on the top bunk without any real effort. He looked like he was checking to see if the kid on that bunk was awake or not. He was also doing something with his hand. I assumed he was nudging the guy to check and see if he was awake. I thought it must have been one of the counselors and didn't think much more about it. I turned around, pulled the sheets off my feet, and pretty quickly went right back to sleep. The next day, I was assigned to do some activities with the kid who was on that bunk. His name was Alan. In the light of day, my mind was much clearer, and I was having a lot of weird thoughts about what had happened the night before. My first thought was that one of the camp counselors might have been molesting Alan. His presence in the cabin and his movements by the bed made it seem possible. But if that were the case, Alan was not acting like anything bad had happened. He was in a really good mood, and we had a lot of fun that day. The following night, it happened again. I once again woke up in the middle of the night, and I saw the same tall and dark figure standing next to Alan's bunk. He once again looked like he was trying to nudge Alan to see if he was awake. This time around, I was a bit put off by what was going on. I was, in fact, worried that whatever the guy was doing to Alan, that he might do it to one of us too. I made it a point that I was going to go ask Alan about it the following day, and maybe see if we needed to go to talk to another counselor. When morning came, I was the first one to get up. I immediately remembered seeing what was happening the previous night, and decided to wake up Alan and talk to him about it. When I rolled out of bed, though, I looked over at Alan's bunk, and it was empty. I was alarmed because his bed wasn't made. We were required to make our beds before leaving the cabin in the morning, and Alan had always made his bed before leaving. I got up and immediately went to talk to my counselor. I was worried that whomever had been in the cabin that night might have taken Alan. The counselor hadn't seen him and immediately contacted camp security. Alan was nowhere to be found. He didn't show up at any of the events that day. He was just gone. The surrounding forest was searched in case he had wandered out and got lost, or if something else had happened. But no one found him. Even now, many years later, I have no idea what happened to Alan. I have dealt with immeasurable amounts of guilt for not getting up that night to see what was happening. Obviously, whomever that guy was, he kidnapped Alan. I might have been able to stop it if I had gotten up and said something. I'm sorry, Alan. Number 2. The Loner. I hated going to summer camp. I mean, I really hated it. It wasn't that the actual camp, the activities, or anything like that was unlikable. I didn't hate being away from my parents. I didn't hate being in the woods. The reason I didn't like summer camp was because I didn't fit in. I was a nerdish, shy, and bookish type, and I wore glasses. Yeah, that's not so much a big deal nowadays. Nerds are kinda in. But when I was young, it definitely was. Glasses pretty much sentenced you to being called a nerd and mocked. So while I was at camp, I mostly just kept to myself. I did all the organized fun, but when we had free time, I didn't hang out with any of the other campers. I just kept to myself. Our camping experience wasn't very long. The whole thing lasted about 3 weeks. On the night before we went home, there was always a camp dance. I never attended it. I didn't have any reason or desire to do so. I wasn't going to dance with anybody, and I definitely didn't want to hang out with the asses who were just going to pick on me anyway. When I was 14, and in my 3rd year at camp, the entire summer went pretty much exactly as it had the previous years. I kept to myself. On the evening of the dance, I was going to just stay in my cabin and read, but there was another kid who had planned on doing that too. I really wanted to be alone, so I decided to go for a nice long walk into the woods. The dance began really in the late afternoon, so I had plenty of time to go ahead and be out in the woods before it got dark. So I set off. The problem was that even though I had plenty of time to be out in the woods, I didn't have much experience actually being out in the woods, and I eventually got lost. Very panicked after a while, I tried my best to figure out a way to get back to camp. But even though I was really well read about what happens out in the woods, reading doesn't always equal practice. I tried like hell to get back to the camp before dark, but I had gotten so turned around that before I knew it, day had turned to dusk. And then dusk turned into night. Before or since, I had never ever been more afraid in my entire life. It only got worse though, as while I was walking off path through the trees, I eventually thought I heard someone following me. At first I brushed it off as if it were nothing. After I knew I was wrong, and it was definitely something, I decided that it must be an animal of some sort. My thoughts about that didn't last very long, though, as it soon became very obvious that whatever was following me was definitely walking on 2 legs. It was really easy to tell from the sounds of the leaves crackling under their feet. I wasn't sure how to react to this revelation. I thought it would be a very bad idea to call out to the person. He obviously knew that I was there because he was following me. That meant that he wasn't a search party coming for me. Not that I had really been gone long enough for them to send anyone after me. The dance was likely still going on. If I had called out and he answered me, I would have no idea what to say. No, he wasn't talking for a reason, and whatever that reason was, it couldn't be a good one. It went on like that for who knows how long. and being followed was pretty awful, but not knowing why I was being followed just made it so much worse. And it didn't stop. Regardless of which direction I walked, what turns I made, the person kept following me. After time kept passing, I kept trying to get away faster and faster. My anxiety only grew exponentially. I began to move faster throughout the trees, and as I moved faster, whomever was following me moved faster too. I mean, honestly, it just seemed like whomever it was just fucking with me, trying to scare me. I began running, and that was my mistake. I tripped over a root of a tree and landed head first on a big rock. My mouth filled up with blood, and although I didn't know it at the time, 2 of my teeth had been knocked out. I was also knocked woozy and had a hard time trying to get my bearings. I didn't have much time to do that though, as whatever was following me quickly grabbed me from behind and flipped me over. It began thrashing me, and my head banged against the rock several more times before I blacked out. When I came to, I wasn't in the forest anymore. I was in a hospital bed. It was a week after my event. The head injury had caused some swelling in my brain. I still have slight traumatic brain injury to this day, and I have been out for a while. I was found the following day when a party went to search for me. They found me practically naked, my clothes ripped to shreds and covered in wounds, laying bloody on a rock. There was no sign of the person who had done it to me, though. The worst thing about it all is that, even though I recovered quite well, other than the TBI and the scarring, I can't for the life of me figure out what the person in the woods wanted. If he had wanted to kill me, he could have. But he didn't. He just scared me for a while and then injured me badly and left. I mean, what was the point? Was it just someone who was evil and wanted to hurt someone? I mean, why did he do any of it? This happened so long ago, and I just don't know. And that is what scares me more than anything else. Not knowing. Number 3. The Bridge. When I was at camp, I had a fun time for the most part. The only time I didn't was my 4th year at camp. There was a big kid in my cabin who was really just a huge bully. His name was Carl, and he just delighted in picking on just about everyone else there. It was miserable because all you could do was try to ignore him and hope he'd get bored and leave you alone. But he was a bully. Bullies never get bored of bullying. Being at camp with him was terrible. He'd do awful things like, when we were doing archery, when there were no counselors around, he would point the bow and arrow at one of us with the arrow cocked. He would then pretend like his hand was slipping, and that he would accidentally let go of the arrow and shoot you. And then he'd threaten to beat the crap out of you later if you went to the counselors about it. He'd punch guys in the middle of the night when they were sleeping, right in the stomach, and then laugh at them when they couldn't breathe. He was a grade A prick. It was pretty much like this with him throughout the entire camp. After a couple weeks of putting up with him, I finally got fed up. I went and complained to one of the counselors. Carl got into huge trouble, and he was taken out of our cabin. He was also not allowed to ever go into the archery grounds again. I thought I was set up for a good time for the rest of the camp. Boy, was I wrong. Things were worse after Carl was removed from the cabin. He made it clear to me that he knew that it was me that had told, and he promised me that he was going to kill me before camp was over. Although I really didn't believe he was going to actually kill me, I had no doubt he would try and get revenge. That revenge came when I was out hiking with my buddy Kevin. I guess I hadn't been aware of this in the beginning, but Carl must have followed us out hiking. I wasn't aware of this, though, until we were headed back to the camp. We had to pass over a rope bridge that was over a ravine. It was a pretty solid bridge that we had been over hundreds of times before. But this time, when we were about halfway across the bridge, Carl appeared to us on the far end, blocking our way. I didn't know what to do, but Kevin sure did. He ran off in the opposite direction. I was frozen in fear, because I remembered his threat against me. I finally decided I needed to run too, and I turned. But in my apprehension, I tripped and fell on the bridge, and Carl quickly caught up to me. He grabbed me and roughly pulled me up to my feet. Then Carl grabbed my head and roughly forced me up against the rope side of the bridge. He rubbed my face against the rope, burning me. "I told you I was gonna kill you, you fucker, and now I'm gonna throw you off this fucking bridge," Carl sneered in my ear. I can admit I was crying, because I honestly believed I was gonna die right there. I pleaded with him to let me go and let him know I was sorry. He didn't care. He basically told me to enjoy dying, and I struggled as he tried to lift me over the rope railing. And Kevin turned out to not be the coward I thought he was. He knew what was happening, and although I didn't see this, he had picked up a huge fucking rock and ran at full speed at Carl. He hit that asshole in the head with the rock, both knocking him over and freeing me. He then picked me up, and we both ran all the way back to camp. Carl eventually was taken away by the police, and he spent an awful long time in juvenile hall. He didn't get convicted of attempted murder because there was no way to honestly prove he was going to kill me. But he never came back to camp, and after he was convicted, I never saw him again. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please hit the button next to the tabby to be informed of new content. Please feel free to follow both Ichigo and myself on Facebook and Twitter. After I made the last video, I got an awful lot of submissions with more summer camp stories, so I decided to make an instant sequel. It took me a while to get this video out though because I've been traveling. In fact, I'm still on vacation, so if you notice a difference in the sound quality, it's because I don't have all of my regular equipment with me. So now, I'm really interested in what you all might like to see from this channel. I've had a bit of a lull in my growth, and I know that has a lot to do with the limited amount of content I've had in June. I've got a lot of big plans for July though. I'm a complete cold weather person myself, so I'll be inside most of the month, enjoying the air conditioning and making new videos. I have an idea for a creepypasta done in a format that is very innovative and interactive as well. I hope you'll enjoy that when that comes out. But until then, make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a killer orange cat might be hiding. Good night.